And we're trying to take a few lessons out of the book of 1 Peter, and we're going to look at verse 3 in chapter 1 tonight. And it's just kind of interesting to me how that Peter writes an old story, and maybe it's not so old to him. I don't know, it's 50 or 60 years old for him. But he writes it with such freshness and with such energy. And there's not a thing here that we haven't heard multiple times or read multiple times. But I want you just to kind of hear it again with the freshness that Peter's speaking, and let it speak to us for a moment. And I'll slow down at certain parts and read it to you and maybe make a comment or two. But he says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ." And that's, in the version I'm reading, says it's an exclamation mark. Like it's praise be to God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us, why in His great mercy? What does that have to do with anything?
Mercy and sinners. Without mercy, we don't.
Okay. Because the whole context is with mercy is that we don't deserve anything. We don't deserve the help. We don't deserve the forgiveness. We don't deserve the salvation. We don't deserve anything. For in His great mercy, He has given us new birth. How many times have we talked about that in the last year or the last few months? How many times have I said Jesus was born into our world so we might be what? Born into His world. He wants us to be born into His kingdom, born again. He's given us new birth. Now listen to this, into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. He's given us a new birth. It's got a lot of hope with it. It's a hope that's alive. And it's a hope about an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. Now, that may not mean anything to you, but I know a lot of people who have depended upon and thought about and planned for an inheritance, and the inheritance has gone away. Have you ever heard of that before? And I have told people several times when they get what we call planned gifts or estate gifts at a university level, don't you ever really count on that until the money is handed to you. Because I don't know how many estates I have had given to a university, and when it comes down to it, it has perished in some way. A caregiver has spent it all, or someone has worked their way in and had a handwritten thing written on deathbed, or it's just amazing how many things happen. And so a good friend of mine called me from La Mesa, Texas, some time back, and he's somewhat older than I, but he's a cotton guy. He's got like 20,000 acres of cotton ground, and his own cotton gin to gin his own cotton, and I've been in the car literally when the United States senators called him and said, "What should I do about this?" He just really, but to talk to him, he just kind of can hardly get one sentence past another type thing. And Jerry called me and he said, "Have you got everything fixed in your estate?" And I said, "Well, Jerry, I don't have much." He said, "I don't care if you got everything fixed." He said, "The only thing that's dumber than an old woman is an old man." And he said, "You get it fixed." Because he said, "I see too many things escaping and not handled right." But this inheritance that we've got, it can't spoil, it can't fade, it can't perish, it can't be stolen. It's our inheritance. And the inheritance is kept for you in heaven. It's kept for you in heaven. It's in a lockbox. It's in heaven. It can't get away. And through faith, we are shielded by God's power until the coming of salvation that is to be revealed in the last time. Now, what does it mean but through faith? By our faith, you see what it says? It is shielded by God's power. Now, just catch the imagery. What does it mean, shielded by God's power?
God himself's protecting it by his own faith.
God's protecting it. If God's protecting it, who can grab it? I mean, this is just amazing language. But it's through our faith. And so could anyone possibly remember what I said Sunday from Joshua? Only it was about a fella named Caleb in the book of Joshua. And we learned that 2 words. It was faith filled and faithful. And we saw what that yielded. And the book that we're reading, and I'm reading off an iPad, which I don't like, but I didn't have time to go to the house and get my Bible, I'm going to use here. And it's always about faith. You can't read the pages of the Bible without finding this thing, who through faith, through our faith, we receive this mercy, we receive this grace. But faith is something that is not just, remember from Caleb's life what faith and faithful meant? I mean, he said, I lived according to my convictions. No matter what, I lived according to my convictions. And because of my convictions, I served wholeheartedly. It means this faith is more than just saying, yeah, I believe. That's just a very, very beginning starting point for faith. This is a living according to your convictions. And you do it wholeheartedly. And you keep on doing it.
Sounds a little like what we've just got through reading in Hebrews. So to me, he's also, it seems to me like he's trying to encourage them, saying, hey, wait a minute. We kind of look at the world. Let's keep our mind on eternal things.
It's exactly right. In fact, when I was reading this, I thought, at the end of the book of Hebrews, I told you, I thought maybe Paul did write it, and then I'll read this and I think, how do I know that Peter didn't write that book of Hebrews? Because it sounds so similar. And what he's saying is, this is what you've got. But I'm telling you, this world is cruel to live in. Do you know that? It's very difficult to live in. And this world, by Satan's design, wants us to ignore, neglect, and forget every bit of this. So watch what he says here. In all this we greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. In all this we greatly rejoice, but I know that for now you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. Does anybody like that statement? Does anybody like any part of that? And what is a trial? What is a trial? It's a difficulty. Has anyone in this audience had a difficulty? All right, Jack's saying, I've had a difficulty. And it's amazing that Jack is here tonight, isn't it? I mean, how many Wednesday nights have we gone without Jack being here? And Karen's had a difficulty. And Jackie Bella, is it Friday you go to the doctor? Or last Friday? Already been? So don't know the results yet. Okay. And those are just some we know about. And there are trials in this audience that we know nothing about, because I'm not willing to tell you at this point. Isn't that interesting? And the suffering, crazy things go off when you. The suffering must be pretty rough, because he says you have to suffer grief in these trials. Grief means something emotional inside of us that happens when you experience hardship that may even go to the point of loss, losing something. We greatly rejoice, but for a little while, Peter says, I know what life is like. You may have had to suffer from all kinds of trials. But these have come so that you have proven the genuineness of your faith. These aren't here for nothing. Don't waste the trials. Now, again, I'm not too crazy about that language. I'm just not too crazy about that language. But that's really what he's saying. Don't waste the trials, because they prove just how much your faith is real. And it's greater than gold, which perishes, even though it's refined by fire. And it results in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So the point is, in these trials, if you will continue to be faithful when Jesus is revealed, what do you get? The inheritance that's kept in heaven by God's power, by God's shield. And he says, though you may not have seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and are filled with inexpressible and glorious joy. And I like that part, though you may not have seen him. Now, Peter writes this, and guess what? He has seen him. He has seen him. But to those to whom he writes, though you may not have seen him, you still what? Believe. You still believe. And so, one more time, no, not one more time. I'm going to keep saying it as long as I can say it. But the beginning of faith filled and the beginning of faith full is a choice that you and I make to believe. We choose to believe that which we cannot see. And we choose to believe that which we cannot understand totally by our own mental makeup. And I don't know why we make such a big deal out of that. There are a lot of things in this life that I don't know how they work, but I believe they work. Like medicine. Now Greg would understand how it works. Greg would understand certain kinds of medicine, put in my bloodstream, what it's going to do. I don't understand how that works. I don't. But when a doctor hands it to me, what do I think? I believe. That's exactly right. I believe. And so I come along with these stories in the Bible that I'm getting sick and tired. Excuse me, those who I'm getting worn out. What's a better word? Disgusted? I'm not sure. I'm just getting tired of people telling me that the book is obsolete and the stories are really can't be true. Like a flood that covers Mount Everest. That's pretty deep. But I choose to believe it. Like a world that's a universe so expansive we don't even know the ends of the earth, the universe. We don't even know the ends of it. Every time we get a better telescope, we find out more. And what's most amazing to me is, in all that jillions of things we see out there, there's this little teeny tiny ball that's smaller than almost everything out there that we see. And he put us on this little tiny ball. And and then we read, he spoke that into existence. And you say, it's a little hard for me to believe. That's what my mom said when I was sitting in a Bible class. at Burns Flat. We're smart enough to go there instead of Deal City. And they first told me the story of David and Goliath. And I told the teacher, I don't think I believe that story. You know? Well, I mean, as a little child, that makes a lot of sense. And Sue's had a Bible study with a lady, and her mental capacity wasn't totally where it should be, probably in Lubbock. And she told her one of the stories of the Bible, and she said, now, I find that a little hard to believe. And she would have been just as sincere as she could be. But to this day, now, she is very much involved in her local congregation, and she has chosen now to believe that which in the beginning and the first time she heard it, now I find that a little hard to believe. You know, it doesn't process too well, you know. But we haven't seen all this, but we believe it. And the interesting part and the biggest part of this is I can believe that which I've read about that happened in the book of Joshua, or that happened prior to the book of Joshua, or that happened after the book of Joshua. But right here it's talking about an inheritance in a place called heaven that God's protecting for me right now. That one's pretty big. That one's pretty big. To think about when I taste of death, that's where I end up immediately. It's so interesting to me. I've been reading these stories over and over again, that people who have these near-death experiences and what they see. And remember I told you that Susan and I went to that retreat last Thursday and Friday when I wanted to be on fall break. I had to go to that retreat. And Sue spent all this time talking to this lady who just lost her husband. They were really good friends of ours, and she's especially a good friend of Sue's. And one of the things she told her was, you know, he almost died in January, and we thought we lost him in January. And said when he came out of all that, he said, I saw your dad, and I saw my parents, and I saw some others, and they were working, it looked like, to build a place for my coming. Now, I don't know if he saw that. I don't know. But he thought he saw it. And who would I dare be to question? Why would I dare go down a pathway of questioning? Because what do I know about it? I've never been there. I've never been that close to death. I've not been through it. Am I scaring everybody? You know, some people get really scared when I talk like this, but I'm telling you, this is real. And it doesn't maybe seem like it fits your mind, but this is what God says, it's what God promises, and He always keeps His promise. Isn't that amazing? Little simple passage that I've glossed over and over again, and then you stop and you say, what is it really saying? And it becomes motivational, and it becomes inspirational, and it makes me want to be faith-filled and faithful. And I may use those two terms the rest of my life. First time I ever used them was last Sunday. I may use them the rest of my life. I kind of like them.